There are 7 foods you should never put in the fridge. It's quite common for people to put various foods in the refrigerator, hoping to preserve their quality. However, there are foods that I'm sure you're refrigerating but shouldn't. A lot of people make this mistake, but you need to stop doing it right now. So, let's get into the video. Number 7. Tomatoes. Have you ever put tomatoes in the fridge and noticed that their flavor completely changed? Well, that happens because the cold directly interferes with the natural ripening process. When refrigerated, tomatoes lose some of their original qualities, like the aroma and the texture we all love. Putting tomatoes in the fridge basically halts their ripening. They stop developing, and as a result, they lose that special taste that makes all the difference in your salad or sauce. Another issue is texture. Fresh tomatoes should be juicy and firm, but exposure to the cold can make them mealy and lifeless. Imagine preparing a fresh caprese salad and ending up with soft, flavorless tomatoes. Nobody wants that. The low temperature causes the cells in the tomato to break down, leading to an unpleasant texture and a dull appearance. No wonder chefs always recommend keeping them at room temperature until they're fully ripe. And what about proper storage? The best practice is to keep them out of the fridge, in a cool and well-ventilated place. When we talk about ventilation, it also helps prevent moisture buildup, which can make tomatoes rot faster. Many times, people put tomatoes in plastic bags, which speeds up the rotting process. Ideally, leave your tomatoes out in the open, like in a fruit bowl. This way, you can keep track of the ripening process and eat them at their peak. Now, if you're wondering, what about when they're overripe? Can I refrigerate them? Yes, but only for a short time. Remember, the goal is always to preserve as much freshness and original quality of the food as possible. Number 6. Potatoes. A lot of people have the habit of putting potatoes in the fridge, but that can be a crucial mistake that directly affects their taste and texture. When stored in the fridge, potatoes undergo a change in starch, which converts into sugar. This process alters their flavor, making them taste sweeter and even a little strange. Moreover, this change in starch also affects the texture of the potatoes. They can become grainy or hard when exposed to very low temperatures. If you've ever made mashed potatoes and found them denser with a weird consistency, the reason might be improper storage. The cold in the fridge compromises the potato's cellular structure, which directly affects the final quality of your dishes. The ideal place to store potatoes is in a cool, dry, and dark environment, like a pantry. Lack of light helps prevent the potatoes from sprouting, which is another common issue. If you store potatoes in a brightly lit place, they'll start to develop sprouts, which also affects their taste and safety for consumption. A practical tip is to use paper bags or perforated boxes to allow air circulation and avoid moisture. Another important factor is ventilation. By storing potatoes in a well-ventilated space, you prevent moisture buildup, which can cause rotting. And never store them with onions. Onions release gases that speed up the deterioration of potatoes. So if you keep the two together, your potatoes will spoil much faster, ruining your pantry. Number 5. Bread. Have you ever stored bread in the fridge and noticed it got hard and dry? That happens because the cold accelerates the drying process of bread. Contrary to what many people think, refrigerating bread doesn't keep it fresh longer. In fact, what happens is that the fridge makes the bread's natural moisture get absorbed quickly, resulting in a much drier and less appetizing texture. A key tip is to store bread at room temperature, in a well-sealed container or a cloth bag, which helps preserve the bread's natural moisture. This keeps the crust crispy on the outside and the inside soft, just like it should be. If you buy fresh bread, it's best to consume it within 2 days. After that, it's recommended to freeze the slices you won't eat right away. Freezing, by the way, is a much more effective alternative than refrigerating bread. When frozen, you can preserve its texture and flavor for much longer, without the risk of drying out. When you're ready to eat the bread, just take out the slices from the freezer and warm them up a bit, either in a toaster or the oven. This way, you'll have fresh slices whenever you want, without compromising quality. Another thing to remember is how you wrap the bread for freezing. It's best to use tightly sealed plastic bags or plastic wrap to ensure the bread doesn't absorb odors or flavors from other foods in the freezer. And one extra tip: separate the slices before freezing. This makes it easier to use day to day, preventing the bread from freezing into one big block that's hard to handle. Number 4. Garlic. Garlic is one of the most versatile ingredients in the kitchen, but refrigerating it can harm its flavor and properties. When garlic is refrigerated, it tends to sprout quickly, which changes both its texture and flavor. Instead of that strong, bold taste, sprouted garlic becomes milder and less intense, which can ruin recipes that rely on that characteristic flavor. Beyond sprouting, excessive cold can cause garlic to lose some of its sulfur compounds, which are responsible for its unmistakable aroma and flavor. This happens because refrigeration disrupts garlic's natural preservation process. So to ensure garlic retains all its qualities, the best place to store it is in a cool, dry spot, away from the fridge. If you tend to buy garlic in large quantities, a good trick is to separate the cloves and store them in a ventilated container, like a basket or a jar with holes. This helps prevent moisture buildup, one of garlic's biggest enemies. Excess moisture not only speeds up the sprouting process but can also cause mold, making the garlic unusable. Another important point is to avoid exposing garlic to direct light. Like potatoes, garlic should be kept in a dark place to prevent it from sprouting or rotting prematurely. A cupboard or pantry is the perfect spot. And contrary to what many believe, there's no need to refrigerate garlic, even in hotter climates. Lastly, remember that processed garlic, like minced or crushed garlic, should be refrigerated to maintain its quality. However, fresh garlic, in its natural form, should be kept out of the fridge to retain maximum flavor and longevity. Number 3. Avocado. Avocados are a unique, delicious, and versatile fruit, but many people make the mistake of putting them in the fridge before the right time. When you place an avocado in the fridge before it's fully ripe, the ripening process is interrupted. This means the fruit will never reach its ideal point, leaving it with a hard texture and lacking the characteristic flavor. Cold slows down the chemical reactions responsible for turning starches into sugars, which give the avocado its creamy and smooth taste. The best way to store avocados is to keep them at room temperature until they reach the ideal ripeness. How do you know when it's ready? You can gently press the skin with your fingers. If the avocado feels slightly soft, it's ready to eat. A common mistake is putting them in the fridge right after buying them, but the ideal is to let them ripen completely before thinking about refrigeration. Once the avocado is ripe, you can refrigerate it, but only for a short time. This will help preserve the fruit for a few more days, preventing it from going overripe. One tip is to cut the avocado in half and spritz some lemon juice on the exposed part. This helps prevent oxidation, keeping the avocado green for longer, even in the fridge. Another useful trick for storing cut avocados is to keep the pit in. The pit helps preserve the fruit by reducing the exposed surface area to the air. Additionally, always store cut avocado in a tightly sealed container or wrapped in plastic wrap to avoid contact with oxygen. This will ensure the avocado stays fresh and flavorful for longer. Number 2. Bananas. Bananas are tropical fruits we love to eat for breakfast or as a quick snack. However, putting them in the fridge can ruin their texture and flavor. When exposed to the cold, bananas undergo thermal shock, causing their skin to darken quickly. Moreover, the cold interrupts the natural ripening process, leaving the flesh with an unpleasant texture, often hard or mealy. The best way to store bananas is to leave them at room temperature. If you bought green bananas, keeping them out of the fridge allows them to ripen naturally, developing the sweet taste and soft texture we love. It's best to hang them or keep them in a fruit bowl, away from other fruits that release ethylene, like apples, to control the ripening process. If the bananas are already ripe and you want to keep them fresh longer, the fridge can be used, but with caution. The skins will darken quickly, but the flesh will remain good for a few more days. It's important to remember that this method should only be used when the bananas are at their ideal ripeness, because if refrigerated before that, they may never ripen properly. A cool trick for those who want to freeze bananas is to peel them before putting them in the freezer. Frozen bananas are perfect for smoothies, and freezing helps preserve the fruit's creamy texture. Number 1. Onions. Storing onions in the fridge can actually make them spoil faster. This happens because the humid environment of the refrigerator speeds up the deterioration process. When exposed to moisture, onions start to soften, rot, and in some cases, even sprout. In other words, instead of lasting for weeks, refrigerated onions can lose their quality in just a few days. The ideal place to store onions is in a dry and cool environment, like a pantry. They need good ventilation to avoid moisture buildup, which is the onion's worst enemy. A practical tip is to store them in paper bags or open baskets, which allow air circulation and help keep the onions fresh for longer. And just like with potatoes, avoid storing them alongside other fruits or vegetables that release ethylene. Another important point is separating whole onions from already cut onions. If you've already cut an onion and want to store it, in this case, the fridge is recommended, but with a few precautions. The cut onion should be placed in an airtight container or wrapped in plastic wrap to prevent oxidation and bad odors. It's best to consume it within 2 days, as after that time, the onion starts to lose its freshness. Sweet onions, like red onions, tend to spoil even faster when refrigerated. This happens because they have a higher water content, making them more susceptible to moisture. If you have this type of onion at home, the recommendation is even more important. Keep them away from the fridge and in a cool, dry place. And if simple, homemade, and balanced meals are what you're after, subscribe to the channel because I'm always bringing you the best videos to help you on this journey. In the video that's now showing on your screen, I reveal the big hydration mistake that's slowly killing you. Click the video and check it out. See you there.